Hello.
Hi, Harriet.
I'm delighted to be joined here today by Chris Sheldrick, the CEO and co-founder of what3words. I have known Chris for what I think we can officially call donkey's years now, and so I'm really delighted to have him here today in the studio. This is such a special business for me because it feels like one of the few things in the world that has actually created almost a quasi-public good, a new layer for both utility and thought for humans. Before we get into the questions, Chris, can I just hand over to you to do the elevator pitch, just for those who might not have come across what3words or would love to refresh their memory?
Yeah, of course. So what3words is a global address system. We've divided the world into 3 metre by 3 metre squares, of which there are 57 trillion. And we've uniquely named each one with 3 words from the dictionary. So by saying something like table, chair, spoon, you're referring to one point in the world somewhere. And that's it.
When I think of all the founders that I've met over the years, and I've been fortunate to meet some incredible folk along the way, you are one of the few who sticks in the mind for having had a true light bulb moment. And if I recall correctly from sort of a decade or so ago, when you first explained this to me, you were on a music gig, possibly in Italy. It was this sort of chaotic, frustrating moment where it's like, well, the field doesn't have an address. How can we find an exact location without having to go into kind of GPS and kind of long, kind of anti-human ways of speaking and interacting with each other? I know I just mentioned this, but I think it's such a profound and important thing about what you've built. Like, you've created this near public good, this information layer that can be used by anyone without excluding anyone. Where has that been most revolutionary, and where has it been most difficult?
I think probably most revolutionary just in the way that it has become a part of everyday life, certainly here in the UK. And for what3words, it's always about our use across sectors. So I would say the fact that it's been revolutionary for a consumer to use it in an everyday way is actually the revolutionary bit, rather than that you can use it for one particular use case. So for me, it's always the ones where someone's put it on a guide for their weekend hiking trip, or the fact that you go to an event and it's just there on the contact us page for where you want to go to. Or that I heard the other day people were on a film shoot and the extras were being told where to stand in a field and given their what3words address. And so whilst sure we've had a lot of high profile partnerships and where you can use your what3words address in a certain car navigation system and partner with a whole load of high profile brands, for me it's the actual behavior change bit which makes it feel real and makes it feel revolutionary. And the fact that you're able to do that on such scale has been the interesting part of the journey. In terms of difficulty, maybe it's kind of the same thing. It does sound very simple, and it is very simple to replace a long GPS coordinate with just 3 words, but it can feel strange to people who've just heard the concept, and we've got to take them on that journey from I understand conceptually what this is to I'm going to use it. And the stranger that is, the harder that adoption shift will be. So I think we've had to find over the years ways to make it feel safe and easy for people to try it and then to sort of repeat their usage of it.
Do you ever think about completely different layers that we're missing as a species that could be out there? And by that, I don't mean application of what3words to sort of new sectors or industries or ways of conceiving things. I mean, are there additional kind of, these, I know I keep saying quasi-public goods, but like these club goods, like things that we could build into how we behave and interact as humans that we haven't even conceived of yet? And do you think about that at all?
I do think about it. And I think what was bizarre to me about making what3words was that there's sort of things that you just do because it's embedded in our behavior, but then you don't particularly question them. So in our case, let's say postcodes were made in the 1960s to deliver mail, and then they got used for navigation, but no one ever stops. I mean, not no one, but very few people stops to think, is this the best way we could do this? And if you take something completely unrelated to our field, like the QWERTY keyboard, from what I understand, the QWERTY keyboard is actually designed in a way to be least human-friendly as possible, I think. And it was something about making sure that people couldn't type too fast because the bits of the typewriter or something would break. Hence, they designed it this way. But yet, still now, this is not a problem about typewriter mechanical parts interfering. But we just keep going because standards evolve over time. They get adoption, and actually changing standards is really hard. And there'll be so many things, whether it's time zone to QWERTY keyboards or whatever it is, that I guess from someone who's come in and made a standard from outside the industry, just because I've gone, I think the world would be better if we did it this way, there'll be a whole load of other things which fit the same bill.
Do you think that we need different frameworks or rubrics for how we think about conceiving of and building businesses because of that? Like, do you think that first-time founders, builders, or indeed second-time can pigeonhole to certain paradigms or ways of doing things, and that we, is there a kind of Cambrian explosion of creativity that's required to find more of these kind of potential new standard sort of settings, as you refer to them?
Yeah, I mean, the way I think about it, so the first thing I did was a music business, which was quite conventional in what the business, the sector we were in. But I did it because I loved music, and I was bringing, I had my own angle, but it was a much more conventional business. So when I came up with the idea for what3words, it's completely different. And I loved the fact that it was different. We didn't come up with the idea just because it was like more different, but it just so happened once we got the idea that it had this unique quality. But I think when it comes to creativity, certainly from having done the first and then doing the second, it's a great thing to have quite a unique idea, which is based around sort of sitting down, solving a problem, rather than if you start coming in from the other way, which is what's an established sector or something like this. I think the sort of concept first, without thinking too much about everything else, can be a very creative way of thinking about it. There's I think, a Steve Jobs quote, which is, creativity is just putting things you've seen in various parts of life together. In our case, it was, I think, my co-founder Mohan had read a 1960s paper on memorability of objects, as in letters versus numbers versus words. And it was that plus me saying, hey, here's a problem, and we just put that together, and that's what made the concept. And there's another point someone made about, like, kids, for example. Young kids are very creative because you don't have any inhibition around these kind of ideas. And actually, as we get older, we get a lot of the creativity knocked out of us because some of these ideas, people will say, oh, that's ridiculous. Or as we come up with things like, wouldn't it be cool if, and you say something and well, kind of, but that would, and actually it can be the inertia and the fact that it makes you feel a bit uncomfortable. Whereas a 6-year-old child might think it's really interesting. And I think what3words is kind of like that. Banana, tulip, cloud sounds kind of crazy, but if you were teaching a kid a few things, it would sound kind of fun and interesting and engaging. And I think maybe just thinking more like, well, how would a young kid solve this with what you know about the world? A lot of things can be done through simplicity, I think, is what I'm saying. And even the adults and the rest of the population will come around to stuff. You just got to break down does simple mean too easy? Actually, simple is good.
Can we talk about monetization? Because obviously with that comes the challenge of, okay, we're creating this new standard, this new way of thinking. How did you initially, and how do you now think about the commercialization piece? Obviously, you've built this successful company. Like, what did that look like at the beginning, and what does it look like now?
So I think at the beginning we weren't quite sure how the monetization would work. I guess, like I was saying, it was very idea first. So it was kind of, here's an idea for a new standard. Can we get people to adopt it? And then we'll work out along the way who's going to pay for this. And so to start with, the app was completely free for consumers. We've monetized with businesses. So if you put what3words in a car navigation system, those are our customers. If you've got a delivery company, those are our customers. These are people who are used to paying for address data and therefore paying for what3words address data is kind of a normal thing for them to do. More recently, certainly in the age of AI and AI going into products, we've now done exactly the same thing. So we're monetizing our, if you like, power users who want to use the what3words app to do a whole load of different things. We now have consumer monetization as well as B2B. But there's also B2G. We sell to government organizations as well, for whom precise location absolutely everywhere is really important. So for us, it's kind of an eclectic mix. When you're doing a standard, that has value to a lot of people when that standard's adopted. So yeah, it's very eclectic.
How have you sort of responded to the sort of criticism of a global addressing system shouldn't be owned by a private company? Like, what's your kind of like sort of response to that?
I think the should part of it is always very subjective, and the should needs to then also, you need to think about how do I get whatever it is known? So a lot of people are making an open standard, as they're called, a lot, not just for geospatial things, but for all sorts of things. But if you make an open standard and say, I've solved X problem, here's how I do it, and you put it on the internet, that means so far probably not many people are using it. And actually what will get it used is marketing awareness and getting into the public eye. And doing that as a business, I think, is far more effective in many cases. I'm sure there'll be cases of successful open standards, but in our case, to get people to move from I've known about this idea to using it, or even from I haven't heard about this idea to I've heard about it, that takes money, and therefore doing it in the framework of a public company, a private company, is a great way of achieving that, because I just don't think it could be achieved in exactly this sector as an open standard. So I think it's kind of, there's an idealistic, wouldn't it be great if all standards were open, but you've got to work out then a way of how you're going to get it socialized.
You sell to government. What's that been like as a process? What's it like at the coalface doing that?
So I think when we started, I assumed that selling to government would be sort of have one central discussion, and it kind of would ripple out into all the layers of government. The reality is somewhat different, I've learned, in that many parts of government, in pretty much every country, I would say, are way more disparate than one would assume. And you have to go bit by bit because there'll be different budgets, different procurement. Now, it can work when the stars align and you actually go and get your product integrated into all those different pieces. But I think it takes far more time and dedication than certainly we had envisaged first time around. It can be a great source of awareness when you get government pushing out comms about your product, but it does take time to get there, and every country is different, every government organisation structured differently. But in general, I think you've got to be prepared to go bit by bit.
Are there any applications, or and maybe especially new applications, that government's been using what3words for that you can talk about? Or
so one of our big success stories has been what3words for use in postal services in countries like Mongolia, where there is no formalised addressing system. And it was one of our first partnerships. And it's good because, as a smaller country, there's sort of less layers of bureaucracy to have to go through. And then once we got it integrated into the postal services, that rippled into e-commerce platforms in Mongolia. It then went into the tourism sector, emergency services. And so just starting with one single use case, we managed to get it used in many different parts of society. It's a good testament to, I think, if you want to do government and you're starting out as a company, is like picking the right size to go after. But similarly here in the UK, it took a lot longer, but the UK's got a lot of people here. And so we have managed to get what3words pretty much de facto standard now for emergency services used across the country. If people are in a tricky spot and you need to communicate that location, it doesn't have an address, then we've spoken to a lot of the emergency services here. So all sorts of different ways of doing it, but it can be incredibly rewarding and mutually beneficial.
It's really interesting what you say about going after the right size market if someone's interested in selling to government. Are there other things that you think people should be sort of bearing in mind? And I say this in the context of a lot more, for example, software VCs starting to look at what it means to sell to government. And I think oftentimes, by the nature of the fact that you will be thinking about problems that are specific to the economy that you're within, you can end up kind of reverse engineering from there. But what you're saying is a bit different. And I suppose you've had the kind of freedom to think like that because of the almost sort of unique nature of what 3words is. But if someone's thinking about trying to find those kind of societally wide improvements and they're thinking about how do I sell to government and possibly still kind of pre-product, like where would you kind of feel out or suggest that they start feeling out?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question because, there's 200 odd countries in the world. You'll be often, I guess, fairly biased through your own experience of where you're based and the government and the way that it works that you're used to. But there will almost undoubtedly be countries who are particularly thinking of innovating in the area you're in, but equally those who go, actually, we've just done a project in this area, and whether it's worked or not, they'll just say, actually, not now. But 200 countries in the world is certainly enough that you'll find the ones who are in your sweet spot. And then you've got big countries and small countries, and the bigger countries are likely to move slower. So if you want to establish it and get something up and running fast, you're probably going to be better off going to a small country. So I'm guessing plenty of other companies would have gone through that kind of Venn diagram of, okay, where do we focus our efforts? But I think you've also got to put your eggs in a few different baskets to make sure that, especially with government, if you can spend a long time and then something not happen. So you've got to have a few different irons in the fire. And for us, let's say Mongolia, UK, we kind of did in parallel. Both of them worked out, and that's then enabled us to go into others.
What has AI meant for what3words?
So AI is an amazing thing. I'm a huge fan of everything AI. In the what3words app, we now have what3words AI, where you can ask it to do loads of things with any of your saved 3-word addresses. You can get it to plan routes with all sorts of 3-word addresses. Before that, the app was very focused on a single 3-word address and what am I going to do with it. And I guess for us, AI makes it far more easy to use them in bulk. There's a voice AI element to it, which is really great because you can then just say, I want to get an Uber from Index Home Raft to Field Count Soap. And you don't have to explain it. You don't have to say, to a what3words address, Field Count Soap, and then sort of explain the system. It will just know that part of the sentence is a what3words address. So AI is really smart, but what it really means for us is just making it effortless so that if my mum wants to report the fly tipping on her field by using what3words AI, it should just make it feel really simple.
What's that been like for leadership and the product team? Has it, was it something where you felt like, we better work out how to kind of slot this in, or was it something where it's felt like a very natural acquisition of kind of additional capacity and growth for sort of both you as a business and for the product itself?
I think for me, AI felt incredibly natural when it came along because I'm someone who's kind of coded as a teenager, but not in my later life, and I'm a designs systems thinker. But then even if I had an idea I wanted to implement, I'd have to sort of wander over to the tech team just for a proof of concept and sort of, if you like, brief it in. So for me, having AI now able to do so many proof of concepts for what we're going to do, I love it. And I think for our tech team and product team, it means they can work so much faster. For our design team, we can get all of our comms assets done, localized so much quicker. So I think, we were early adopters, very proud to say, and every new model that comes out, we just get that bit more efficient, and we get it in our product as much as we can as well.
There's a lot of chatter at the moment about Jevons paradox and the idea of getting something more efficient and then demand going up for something. And situating that around increasing investment into things as opposed to worrying about jobs going, actually saying if you can kind of get through that phenomenon, you're actually going to, as a business and as a business owner, put more money, put more time, more investment into something. It sounds like you're very much like living that out and doing that at what3words.
Yeah, I think certainly for me, the way you think about productivity through AI is you think, wow, I've got this big long roadmap, got all these features to build, and how much quicker can we build everything due to AI? And that is exactly what we're doing at the moment. Stuff is happening so much faster across the board. So I think we just look at it as this phenomenal enabler, both for the product to be integrated, because frankly now AI can integrate what3words into a workflow. You don't necessarily need a human, depending on what it is. So it's a great way to consume what3words as a business. It's great for us to get more done more fast. So yeah, I think across the board, we embrace it.
Have you ever thought about space and mapping it?
So yeah, space is an interesting one. I guess from our perspective, it would only be addressing it because we just do addresses. We wouldn't be
Yes.
mapping much. Yeah, someone did once speak to me about Mars. I think commercially, it's safe to say it sort of wouldn't be a priority yet, just due to like low volume of people either on the moon or Mars. But if that changed, sure, they're going to need a way of getting around. And I'm pretty sure that when the pictures come back from the planets, I think they've got some kind of coordinate system. It probably is not the same one we use here. But if there's coordinates, then there can be words.
With that in mind, does addressing a place allow for new forms of ownership or new ways of thinking about ownership?
Yeah, I definitely think it does, because for so long, there have been places in the world that they might have coordinates attached to them, but those coordinates are not used in the real world. And so one of the great use cases we have in Mongolia, again, is there's a company there called Ard Credit who will actually give financial credit to people who might be nomadic because they've got a what3words address that they can then say, right, this is where you live. They will then give them credit in a way that formerly they had no way of identifying because there was no address. And that's just a concrete way of going, okay, this can now be enabled because there's a system everyone's standardized on. But in the past, you couldn't do it.
We're seeing kind of new, exciting, sexy businesses like Odyssey, SpaceX of the Sea being set up. And that made me wonder what businesses haven't been built yet that could use what3words. Do you ever think that way around, that you think of great applications for it that we're just kind of on the cusp of?
That's very interesting. I mean, I guess the ocean, we're not used that much in the ocean. Some people definitely do. You'd have to be a very good linguist to use us in the ocean, because that's where all the longest, most complicated words go. But it's 2/3 of the world, and there'll probably be many businesses who are doing stuff there who could use what3words. And I think they maybe just sort of come into our radar. They're not applications we'd thought of particularly, but it's cool that they do. But I think maybe I don't have a whole load in my head ready to go, but that's kind of the nice thing about it, that they just come into customer support, and it's great that what3words fulfills that need for them.
What about going down into the depths or going up into the sky?
Yeah, that's an interesting problem, and you'll be testing my maths there as to whether at the top of Everest it's as much as a 3 meter square as the depths of the ocean. I think my understanding is sort of near enough in both cases, but you're right in that it will go like this.
And you could use yes, if you were 2 miles down or 2 miles up.
You can use what3words 2 miles down, 2 miles up, just like you could do a latitude and longitude, and you will know exactly the spot.
You've said before that your goal is to make your own app redundant, that you become this invisible layer for the world. How close to that are you?
It's a great way of framing it, because the more that what3words is integrated into everything else, there becomes less of a reason to consume it at an app layer. And I'm definitely on the train that AI is going to completely rethink user experience. What do we actually need to go into an app for? Probably not that much going forward. So yeah, I think AI just expedites that massively. And if you can use what3words and everything else without thinking about it, that's the end goal, is why would I need the what3words app? So yeah, we'll see if that becomes reality.
If you had a magic wand, what business would you wave into existence today?
I would wave into existence something around standardizing addresses and other geospatial stuff for LLMs, which as yet seems remarkably untapped, I think.
Oh, okay. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, just I guess large language models don't have the big address data sets, and so it's something that they currently do not do very well, whereas they do so much so well. And so I think a business, and we've got a few irons in that fire, but a business will come in and dominate how AI works with geospatial data.
Is there anything we could do better as a country when it comes to encouraging people towards founding things?
I think the UK encourages entrepreneurs very well. There's all sorts of things like EIS, SEIS that are not the same in other countries. I think just things for us, recruiting, visas, all of these kind of things are things which were tricky at one point, have got better and faster. And so I think the ecosystem is pretty good. Like if you found a company in London, you've got loads of opportunity, you're centered in a place where you can get around the world very easily to other customers or where people may be. So I'm a big advocate for the UK being a great place to start a business, being great for us. I don't have a big shopping list of things from that perspective.
You've run what3words for 13 years now, which I think takes a huge amount of courage and tenacity. People who do this themselves day in, day out know that you know one lives and breathes something. What's that been like for you over time? You know, what's it like now as CEO, as leader of the company and a founder of the company versus when you started? And how do you think about the kind of tougher moments versus the great moments?
So I think my overriding feeling is that, I love what3words, the idea, and that carries you through so much. And so whenever I'm now in a meeting, on a call, pitching the idea, I get the same kick out of it as I did on day one, just because the idea kind of pervades so much change in, pre-AI, post-AI, pre-COVID, post-COVID. And the idea still has that elegance, and it still brings in consumers, brings in businesses. Having a concept that you love as your business will get you through so many of those tough times. But equally, we've started out from 3 of us to a much bigger company, learned a whole bunch along the way. But I also love what we've built in terms of the team. We talked about the team in Mongolia. We now have a team in Vietnam. We have one in Trinidad and Tobago. The what3words team, it's kind of unique. Those are not necessarily the most common places for a British company to have team. But I guess the story, the genesis of making what we have today feels, I feel a big part of that personally. And yeah, I guess I love where we are. I love the excitement of all the products we're about to bring out, everything we've achieved. And so, yeah, it's very much a part of me and still absolutely love it.
What is the weirdest way that someone has used what3words?
There are plenty of weird ways that people have used what3words. I guess what immediately flies to mind is people sort of tattooing them into their arms.
Really?
For where they either got married or kind of important life moments. And I guess for me and for us, it's kind of a special moment, right? When people are doing that kind of immutable thing into their body. But it's about the fact that location is really important to them. Yeah. And the words give it a kind of, this location is locked. The words don't change, they're fixed. And so I think every time we see one, there's plenty of examples now of the tattoos. It's just another reinforcing example of how location is just so important to people.
Even today, new landlords sent over all the information for the flat with what3words locations. Cool. And I actually was going to reply. But those are those like consumer.
Yeah.
Moments that I think, they're not just kind of consumer moments, are they? As you say, it's the ability for someone to place themselves like in the most like primal and fundamental way in the world in which they live, which is just really, really special. I also think just listening to you giving that answer, like there's just, there's a whimsy to it. Do you know, like it brings joy and mirth. Mm-hmm. Like you could, because the combination of seeing words next to each other that aren't meant to be next to each other it always gives me a tickle. You just
I agree, and I guess it's part of what 3words is about, albeit somewhat accidental, because really it's just a shorter, or let's say simpler, way of representing this big long number. But actually, by doing it with 3 words, it's there's a lot of combinations of those, right? Trillions, even though it feels so kind of basic on one level. But in some way, it'll conjure up something in your mind, and that makes it, that can make it very special.
And it's almost like a sort of identity of sort. Like my other half and I both have different what 3 words for our offices in the house, and somehow it's like you look to find meaning in your what 3 words versus the other person's, and it's there's a very human dimension to it.
There is, and I guess that's why, the concept resonated when we first came up with it, because as you say, it feels human. You're taking something which is fundamentally unhuman, this very long, sort of quite stale sounding sequence, and you're making it human. And as you say, even in a short period and a short space geographically, the words will be completely different. But I guess that's also kind of a nice quirk, that it's just completely unique and sort of out of nowhere, like this spot is this, and that's it.
Yeah. Chris, thank you so much for taking the time and for coming on. If people want to get in touch or find out more about what 3 words, where can they go?
what3words.com. I'm on plenty of social media, so please do get in touch. We'd love to chat to people.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.